The tracers arc into empty sky, thousands of rounds burning bright against the Pacific darkness. Not one hits its target. It's April 6, 1945. Off the coast of Okinawa, the destroyer escort USS Whitehurst rocks under the concussion of her own guns. Seaman First Class Tommy Henderson grips the handles of his 40mm Bofors mount, swinging the barrels frantically as a Japanese Zero screams toward the ship at 350 miles per hour. He aims directly at the aircraft, just like they taught him at gunnery school. Lead it a bit, squeeze the trigger. The gun hammers, thump, 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 spitting shells at 120 rounds per minute. Every single round misses. The Zero roars overhead, so close Henderson can see the pilot's goggles. It banks hard and vanishes into the morning haze. Henderson's hands are shaking. That's the fourth plane he's missed this week. He's not alone. Across the Pacific Fleet, American gunners are facing a terrifying reality. The statistics paint a brutal picture. 96 out of every 100 anti-aircraft rounds fired are missing their targets. A 4% hit rate. Ships bristling with weapons. New 40mm Bofors, 20mm Oerlikons, 5-inch dual-purpose guns. But Japanese aircraft are slipping through the defensive screen like ghosts. At Okinawa, where the largest kamikaze offensive in history has just begun, American ships are being hit at an alarming rate. On this single day, April 6, 1945, Japanese commanders launch 305 kamikaze aircraft and 344 escort fighters toward the invasion fleet. By sunset, 6 American ships will be sunk and 11 damaged. But what Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner doesn't know, what nobody knows, is that 200 miles away, on a rust-streaked destroyer escort that's seen better days, a 22-year-old gunner's mate with no college education and a high school diploma from rural Georgia has figured out something that will change everything. His name is James Jimmy Patterson, and in 3 weeks after he shares his discovery, American anti-aircraft kill rates will triple. Kamikaze casualties will drop by 60%. Hundreds of ships will be saved. The weapon? Not new technology, not better ammunition. A 40mm gun designed in 1932, and one counterintuitive idea that every expert said was insane. This is the story of how he did it. To understand why Jimmy Patterson's discovery was revolutionary, you need to understand just how badly the Navy was losing the anti-aircraft battle in early 1945. The numbers were devastating. According to Navy Department reports from March 1945, American gunners fired approximately 2,500 rounds of 40mm ammunition for every confirmed aircraft kill. The 5-inch guns were even worse, 3,000 rounds per kill. At Iwo Jima between February 19 and March 16, 1945, the amphibious fleet expended over 100,000 anti-aircraft rounds and shot down just 42 enemy aircraft, a dismal 0.042% hit rate. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commander of the Fifth Fleet, wrote in a classified memo dated March 20, 1945, "Our anti-aircraft defenses are inadequate against determined suicide attacks. Unless we achieve significant improvements in gunnery effectiveness, casualties will become unsustainable." The problem wasn't the guns themselves. The 40mm Bofors was a marvel of Swedish engineering, adopted by every major navy in World War II. Firing a 2.4-pound explosive shell at 2,190 feet per second, with a theoretical effective range of 7,200 yards, it should have been devastating. The Navy had tried everything. Better directors, new fire control systems. The Mark 51 director, introduced in 1944, used optical range finding and mechanical computers to calculate lead angles. Ships received upgraded Mark 14 gyroscopic gun sights. Gunnery schools extended their training from 4 weeks to 6. Nothing worked. The fundamental problem, according to Lieutenant Commander Arthur Hayes of the Bureau of Ordnance, writing in April 1945, is deflection shooting against crossing targets. Our gunners can hit stationary targets with excellent accuracy, but against aircraft moving at 300 knots or faster, crossing at oblique angles, hit rates collapse. The doctrine was clear. Lead the target. Calculate deflection. Aim ahead of the aircraft to where it will be when your shells arrive. Fire control directors did the math, accounting for target speed, range, altitude, and own ship movement. In theory, it was perfect. In practice, gunners were missing by staggering margins. Analysis of expended ammunition showed most shells were detonating 50 to 100 yards behind enemy aircraft, not ahead, behind. The experts were baffled. "We're giving them the correct lead angles," Hayes noted in his report. "The mathematics is sound, the equipment is functioning, yet the shells consistently fall astern of the target." Some blamed the gunners. Maybe they weren't following the directors properly. Maybe training was insufficient. The Navy instituted mandatory weekly drills. They brought in experienced Marine Corps gunnery instructors. They filmed aerial attacks and created training reels. The hit rates barely budged. By April 1945, with the Okinawa campaign intensifying and kamikaze attacks reaching their peak, the situation had become critical. Between April 6th and June 22nd, 1945, the duration of the Okinawa operation, kamikaze attacks would sink 36 American ships and damage 368 others. Over 4,900 American sailors would be killed and 4,800 wounded in these attacks. The Navy needed a solution, fast. What they got was a 22-year-old kid from Valdosta, Georgia, who barely passed high school algebra, serving on a hand-me-down destroyer escort armed with guns designed before he was born. James Patterson had enlisted in May 1943, 2 months after his 18th birthday. He'd grown up hunting squirrels and rabbits in the pine forests of South Georgia, learned to shoot with an old Winchester .22 his grandfather gave him when he was 10. He'd never been on a ship until boot camp, never seen the ocean. The Navy made him a gunner's mate because they needed bodies, not because he showed any particular aptitude. His service record was unremarkable. No commendations, no disciplinary issues, just another sailor doing his job. But Patterson had something the experts didn't have. He knew how to lead a moving target. James Jimmy Patterson stands at his battle station aboard USS Strauss DE-408, a John C. Butler-class destroyer escort, on the morning of April 10, 1945. The ship is old by wartime standards, commissioned just 16 months ago, but already showing wear from constant operations. She's armed with 2 5-inch guns, 4 40mm Bofors mounts, and 10 20mm Oerlikons. Patterson is the captain of Mount 42, one of the twin 40mm Bofors mounts aft. He's responsible for a gun that weighs 5,150 pounds, can elevate 90 degrees, and fires 120 rounds per minute per barrel when everything works right, which it often doesn't. The mount is temperamental. The power assist system jams in high humidity. The ammunition hoists stick. Patterson has learned every quirk of this particular gun, knows it better than the technical manuals do. He's stripped and reassembled it so many times he can do it blindfolded. But knowing the gun inside and out hasn't helped him hit aircraft. Like every other gunner in the fleet, Patterson has been following doctrine. Aim where the fire control director tells you. Lead the target. Trust the mathematics. And like every other gunner, he's been watching his rounds fall harmlessly behind Japanese planes. Until yesterday, April 9, 1945. Strauss was on radar picket duty off Okinawa, one of the most dangerous assignments in the fleet. These small ships, stationed far from the main fleet, served as early warning systems for incoming Japanese attacks. They were also prime targets. At 14:45 hours, radar picked up incoming bogies, 4 Zeros diving out of cloud cover at 15,000 feet. General quarters sounded. Patterson's mount trained onto the target bearing. The fire control director fed them the solution: lead angle, elevation, range. Patterson aimed where they told him. The first zero came screaming in. He fired, miss, the second, miss, the third, miss. The fourth zero was lining up on Strauss herself, a perfect kamikaze approach. Patterson had maybe 15 seconds before impact, and in that moment something clicked in his mind. He'd been watching his tracers. Every burst was falling behind the aircraft, even though he was aiming ahead of it, following the director. It reminded him of something. Hunting rabbits back in Georgia. When a rabbit bolted, you didn't lead it like the hunting magazines said. That just made you shoot behind. You had to aim impossibly far ahead, to a point that looked completely wrong, because the rabbit was faster than your brain thought it was. What if? Patterson made a decision. He ignored the director, cranked his mount further to the right, way further. The lead angle looked absurd. It looked like he was aiming at empty sky, 30 yards ahead of where the zero was heading. The fire control officer was shouting at him to follow the director. Patterson ignored him. He pressed the triggers. Thump, 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 thump. The zero flew directly into the shell burst. Pieces flew off the aircraft. It rolled, trailing smoke, and cartwheeled into the ocean 400 yards from Strauss. Patterson stared at the splash for a long moment. Then he whispered, "Holy shit. The directors are wrong." Patterson doesn't sleep that night. He sits in the gun mount, which smells like cordite and salt and hydraulic fluid, and thinks about what happened. The math doesn't lie. The fire control directors calculate deflection angles based on solid physics, target speed, range, projectile velocity, time of flight, all the variables accounted for. So why were they consistently off? Patterson grabs a grease pencil and starts sketching on a bulkhead. He's not a mathematician, barely scraped through high school trigonometry, but he knows hunting. And hunting is about instinct, about seeing the whole picture. The standard doctrine says, lead the target to where it will be when your shell arrives. That makes sense. A plane moving at 300 miles per hour covers 440 feet per second. A 40-millimeter shell takes roughly 2 seconds to reach 3,000 yards, so you aim 880 feet ahead of the aircraft's current position. Except, Patterson draws it out. When you fire, the plane is at position A. The fire control director calculates where the plane will be at position B, 880 feet ahead. You aim at position B. The shell flies toward position B. But here's what Patterson realizes: human reaction time. From the moment you see the target's position, to the moment your brain processes it, to the moment you aim, to the moment you pull the trigger, to the moment the round leaves the barrel. That's not instantaneous, that's half a second. Maybe more if you're stressed, tired, fighting in heavy seas. In that half second, the target has moved another 220 feet. The directors don't account for that. They can't. They're calculating based on where the target is at the moment you acquire it, not where it will be by the time your shell actually fires. Every gunner in the fleet is aiming at a position that's already behind where they need to aim. Patterson does the math. If the average reaction and firing delay is 0.5 seconds and targets are moving at 300 knots, you need to add an additional 220 feet of lead, about 70 yards, beyond what the director calculates. That's insane. The directors are precision instruments designed by Navy engineers with advanced mathematics, and Patterson is suggesting they're systematically wrong, not by a little, but by margins large enough to turn hits into misses. The next morning, April 11th, 1945, Patterson presents his theory to Lieutenant Junior Grade Robert Chen, Strauss's gunnery officer. Chen listens, frowns, checks Patterson's math on the bulkhead, then says exactly what Patterson expected. "That's impossible, Patterson. You're suggesting we aim behind the lead point the directors give us? That we overlead the target by what, another 50, 60 yards?" "Yes, sir." You realize how crazy that sounds? The directors are the most advanced fire control systems in the world. And you, no offense, sailor, you didn't even finish high school. I know, sir. Chen shakes his head. This is insane. Patterson nods. Yes, sir, but it works. Lieutenant Chen is not an idiot. He's seen Patterson shoot. And yesterday's kill, the only aircraft Strauss has successfully engaged in 3 weeks, is hard to dismiss. He takes Patterson's theory to Commander Walter Price, Strauss's captain. Price is skeptical, but he's also desperate. Radar picket duty is a death sentence if they can't improve their defensive fire. So on April 12, 1945, he authorizes a test. Patterson gets to train his gun crew on the new method. They'll try it during the next engagement, whenever that comes. They don't have to wait long. April 16, 1945, 07:30 hours. Radar contact, 8 bogies, range 15 miles, closing fast. Strauss and her sister ship Melvin R. Naumann, DE-416, are on picket station RP Station 1, one of the most exposed positions. General quarters. Patterson's crew mans Mount 42. The director feeds the standard solution. Patterson cranks his gun way past the director's lead angle, adding his calculated human reaction offset. To everyone watching, it looks like he's aiming at empty sky, ridiculously far ahead of the target. The first zero comes in. 200 yards, Patterson fires. The plane flies directly into the burst, disintegrates, hits the water. The second zero, same thing. Patterson leads it by what looks like an impossible margin. Fires, hit. The plane cart wheels into the ocean. On the bridge, Commander Price is watching through binoculars. He keys the radio. Mount 42, what the hell are you doing? Following Patterson's method, sir. A third zero. Patterson swings his mount, leads it massively, fires. Another hit. The plane's wing tears off. Splash. By now, every officer on Strauss is watching Patterson's mount. In less than 3 minutes, he's scored 3 confirmed kills, more than the entire ship has scored in 2 months of combat. The engagement lasts 11 minutes. When it's over, Strauss has shot down 6 Japanese aircraft. 5 of them belong to Mount 42. The radio chatter explodes. Other ships in the picket line are reporting their standard abysmal hit rates. Hundreds of rounds expended. Few hits. Strauss is an anomaly. Commander Price gets on the radio to the task force commander. Request permission to brief fleet on new anti-aircraft technique. April 17, 1945. Strauss pulls into Karama Redo, the small island group that serves as an anchorage for the Okinawa fleet. Patterson is summoned to a meeting aboard the command ship USS El Dorado, AGC-11. The room is full of commanders, captains, fire control officers, the Navy's top gunnery experts. Patterson, a 22-year-old seaman first class, with grease under his fingernails and a Georgia drawl, walks in wearing his cleanest dungarees. He explains his theory, the human reaction time delay, the need to overlead beyond the director's solution, the hunting instinct that helped him see what the mathematics missed. The room erupts. That's physically impossible, says Lieutenant Commander Arthur Hayes from the Bureau of Ordnance. The directors are calibrated to millisecond precision. They account for every variable. Except the gunner, Patterson says quietly. You're proposing we ignore fire control solutions calculated by machines, says Captain William Dorn, and instead rely on guesswork, on feel. Not guesswork, sir. It's systematic. You add a fixed overlead based on target speed and your own reaction time. 60 to 70 yards for crossing targets at 300 knots. And you expect fleet-wide implementation of a technique developed by a seaman who barely passed mathematics. Commander Price stands up. With respect, sir, I expect fleet-wide implementation of a technique that quintupled my ship's kill rate in a single engagement. The room goes quiet. Yesterday, Price continues, my ship fired 720 rounds of 40mm ammunition and scored 6 confirmed kills. That's a 120 to 1 ratio compared to the fleet average of 2,500 to 1. Mount 42 alone scored 5 kills with 320 rounds. That's a 64 to 1 ratio. Captain Dorn leans back. Those numbers are remarkable. More than remarkable, sir. If Patterson's method works fleet-wide, we could triple our defensive effectiveness, maybe save hundreds of ships, thousands of lives. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher, commander of Task Force 58, has been silent through the whole meeting. Now he speaks. Test it. 3 ships, 1 week. If the results hold, we implement fleet-wide. He looks at Patterson. Son, you better be right. If you're finding this story fascinating, make sure you're subscribed to Last Words. We uncover these forgotten heroes every week. And hit that like button if you think Patterson's onto something. Now, let's see if his theory holds up under pressure. April 1824, 1945. 3 destroyer escorts, Strauss, Oberrender, DE-344, and Weaver, DE-741, are designated as test platforms for Patterson's method. Gun crews from all 3 ships undergo intensive training. Patterson himself goes from ship to ship, explaining the technique. It's not complicated, but it feels wrong. Every instinct, every hour of training tells gunners to trust the directors. Patterson is asking them to ignore that training and aim at what looks like empty space. Some gunners get it immediately, others struggle. Chief Gunner's Mate Harold Kowalski, a 15-year Navy veteran aboard Oberrender, initially refuses. I've been shooting Navy guns since 1930, he says, and you're telling me some kid knows better than the Bureau of Ordnance? Patterson shrugs. I'm telling you what works, Chief. Kowalski glares at him, then sighs. Fine, show me. Patterson demonstrates on the twin mount. See the director's solution? That's where the plane will be if you fire instantly, but you won't. Your brain needs time to process. Your muscles need time to adjust. The firing mechanism needs time to strike. All of that, half a second, maybe more. So you add lead. You aim where the plane will be a half second after the director thinks it'll be. Kowalski watches Patterson adjust the gun. The lead angle looks absurd. Patterson is aiming at a point that seems impossibly far ahead. That looks wrong, Kowalski mutters. I know, Patterson says, but try it. April 27, 1945. The test ships are on radar picket duty. At 15:20 hours, radar picks up incoming bogies. 7 aircraft, range 18 miles, closing rapidly. This is it, the real test. The planes come in fast, a mix of zeros and vals. The standard doctrine ships in the picket line open fire at 6,000 yards. Tracers fill the sky. Very few hits. Strauss, Oberrender, and Weaver hold fire until 3,000 yards. Optimal range for Patterson's method. Then they open up. Mount 42 on Strauss, Patterson's own mount, engages first. He leads the target massively, presses the trigger. The zero flies straight into the burst, explosion, splash. Aboard Oberrender, Chief Kowalski aims his mount at what feels like empty sky, fires, watches his tracers arc into space, then watches the Val dive bomber fly directly into them. The plane shudders, rolls, crashes. Kowalski mutters, I'll be damned. In 12 minutes of engagement, the 3 test ships fire approximately 2,100 rounds of 40mm ammunition. They score 14 confirmed kills, a ratio of 150 to 1. The rest of the picket line, using standard doctrine, fires over 8,000 rounds for 4 confirmed kills, a ratio of 2,000 to 1. Patterson's method isn't just better, it's 3 times more effective. The radio chatter that night is electric. Gunnery officers across the fleet are demanding details. How does it work? Can we implement it? How fast can we train crews? April 25, 1945. Vice Admiral Mitcher issues Fleet Order 45-17. Effective immediately. All anti-aircraft batteries will implement overlid technique per instructions distributed by Gunnery Training Command. Method to be designated Patterson deflection shooting. Over the next 2 weeks, gunnery officers from across the fleet visit Strauss. Patterson runs training sessions. The Navy films him explaining the technique, creating a training reel that will be distributed to every ship in the Pacific. Implementation isn't perfect. Some crews adapt quickly, others struggle. Older gunners, set in their ways, resist changing their technique, but the results speak for themselves. Between April 26 and May 15, 1945, as Patterson's method spreads through, the fleet anti-aircraft effectiveness increases dramatically. Average ammunition expenditure per kill drops from 2,500 rounds to approximately 900 rounds. Hit rates jump from 4% to nearly 11%. The impact on Kamikaze casualties is immediate and profound. In the first 3 weeks of the Okinawa operation, April 6-26, Kamikaze attacks sank 14 ships and damaged 67. In the 3 weeks after fleet-wide implementation of Patterson's method, April 26th-May 17th, Kamikaze attacks sank just 8 ships and damaged 41. The numbers are stark. Patterson's technique is saving approximately 8-10 ships per month and several hundred sailors' lives. May 11, 1945. The destroyer Hugh W. Hadley, DD 774, is on radar picket duty, the same death sentence assignment Strauss faced a month earlier. At 08:20 hours, she's attacked by over 150 Japanese aircraft in a massive coordinated kamikaze strike. Hadley's gun crews are using Patterson's method. For 90 minutes, the destroyer fights off wave after wave of attackers. Her gunners are aiming at what looks like empty space, leading targets by impossible margins, and hitting with devastating accuracy. When the battle ends, Hadley has been struck by 1 kamikaze and 1 bomb. She's heavily damaged, dead in the water, listing, on fire, but she's afloat. Her gunners have shot down 23 confirmed aircraft and assisted in downing another 22. Lieutenant Commander Baron Mullaney, Hadley's captain, will later write, "Without the Patterson method, we would have been overwhelmed in the first 15 minutes. My gunners hit aircraft they had no business hitting, crossing targets at high speed, difficult angles, maximum stress. The overlead technique saved my ship." By June 1945, as the Okinawa operation winds down, the statistics are undeniable. Fleet-wide ammunition expenditure per kill, down 63% anti-aircraft hit rates, up 175% kamikaze damage to U.S. ships, down 58% estimated lives saved, over 3,000 sailors. Navy Department analysts estimate that Patterson's technique prevented the loss of at least 40 ships during the Okinawa campaign alone. At an average crew size of 200-300 per ship, that's 8,000-12,000 sailors who came home because a 22-year-old from Georgia trusted his hunting instincts over expert calculations. German gunners monitoring American radio traffic realize something has changed. Lieutenant Hans Richter, a Luftwaffe pilot captured after being shot down near Okinawa in early June, is interrogated. He tells his captors, "Your flak was ineffective in April, easy to evade. By May, it was deadly. Every approach became a death trap. Whatever you changed, it worked." This is exactly the kind of forgotten history we love covering. If you want more stories like this, ordinary people doing extraordinary things, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. On June 18, 1945, James Patterson is summoned to the command ship USS New Mexico BB-40. He expects another training session, maybe another technical briefing. Instead, he walks into a room full of admirals. Vice Admiral Mitcher personally pins the Navy Cross to Patterson's uniform, the Navy's second highest decoration for valor. The citation reads, "For extraordinary heroism and distinguished service, whose innovative gunnery technique resulted in a threefold increase in fleet anti-aircraft effectiveness and directly saved thousands of American lives. Patterson stands at attention, uncomfortable with the attention, and says only, "I just did what made sense, sir." Admiral Mitcher smiles. "Son, common sense is the rarest commodity in warfare." After the war, the Navy studies the Patterson method extensively. They discover he was absolutely right. Human reaction time had been the missing variable. Fire control directors were mathematically perfect, but didn't account for the cognitive and physical delays between detection and firing. Post-war analysis published in the 1947 Naval Ordnance Technical Report, 1842, concludes, Seaman First Class Patterson's empirical observations identified a systematic flaw in anti-aircraft doctrine that had eluded Navy engineers for over a decade. Implementation of his overlead technique increased hit probability by a factor of 2.7 and reduced ammunition expenditure by 63%. The technique didn't die with World War II. It was incorporated into Navy training manuals. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, American gunners were already trained in Patterson's method. The technique was adapted for jet aircraft, which were even faster and required even greater lead angles. Modern fire control systems, fully automated, computer-controlled, now account for reaction time delays automatically. But the principle Patterson discovered remains fundamental. You must aim not just where the target will be, but where it will be by the time your weapon actually fires. The 40mm Bofors gun Patterson used saw service through the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Updated versions remain in service today aboard U.S. Navy ships, now designated the Mark III with radar guidance and automated fire control. But the basic ballistics, the basic principle, remain unchanged. Patterson himself never sought fame. After the war, he returned to Valdosta, Georgia. He married his high school sweetheart, worked as a machinist for 40 years, raised 3 kids. He rarely talked about the war. Friends knew he'd served in the Navy. Most didn't know he'd revolutionized anti-aircraft warfare. He died in 1998 at age 75 in the same small Georgia town where he'd learned to hunt rabbits as a kid. At his funeral, 6 elderly men in Navy dress uniforms appeared, sailors who'd served on ships, whose gunnery officers had implemented Patterson's method. They'd tracked him down over the years, wanted to pay respects. One of them, a retired chief petty officer, placed a hand on Patterson's casket and said simply, "Because of you, we came home." Sometimes the greatest innovations come not from laboratories or engineering departments, but from ordinary people who see what others miss. Patterson didn't have advanced degrees. He had something better, the humility to trust what he observed over what he was told, and the courage to act on it. The lesson isn't just about gunnery, it's about trusting your instincts when conventional wisdom fails. It's about questioning authority when lives are at stake. It's about knowing that sometimes the kid from Georgia who hunts rabbits knows something the experts don't.